Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Sorry about last week. Had a little vehicle issue. Glad to be back. Our guest tonight is retired FBI agent David J. Baldovin. He's here to remind us about the work of Philip Haney, one of the founding members of DHS, and what he was trying to warn us about when he was killed approximately 5 years ago under suspicious circumstances. David did a couple of interviews with Phil Haney in 2019, the year before Haney was found dead. Those interviews are posted on our website, and I would encourage you to watch them. David, welcome back to the show, and I'm glad to have you. Glad you could be with us again.
Glad to be with you, Dave and Kevin. Thank you for having me again.
Well, tell us how you came to know Phil Haney and what people need to know about him.
Dave, before I get into the subject matter of the interview, I would like to give you and Kevin a plug for what you guys are doing here in Tennessee. I've watched some of your programs. The people that you guys have had on, and I'm not including myself in that. You're really doing a service, I think, you guys, to the people of Tennessee with people like Jeff Adicott that you've had on, and I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, the National Guard, the discussion on the National Guard, and your Tennessee legislators. So I'd like to just, thank you for what you're doing, okay, for whatever impact you guys might be having. It's not because you're not making the effort, and I can tell you there's one guy out here that appreciates it, and I wanted to tell you that, okay?
Well, hey, I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you feel that way, and we enjoy doing it, and we do hope that it's, we try to make it worth people's while. And I will say I have some of the best guests on this show. I think that of any show out there, certainly any show of this size out there, I've had some really quality people, and I got a great producer. So, and I appreciate you. I include you among those, among the best of my guests, and I'm glad to have you as a friend as well. And so, thank you for that.
You got it. Anytime.
So,
okay, we want to get into Phil Haney.
Yep.
Okay, just a brief background. Of course, I started, I guess, my education in the Islamic field started around the time I learned about the Muslim Brotherhood's subversion of the FBI training program at Quantico, which is about 12 years ago now, Dave. You probably recall 2011, 2012, 2013. Our training got subverted where there was a nexus that was destroyed in our training curriculum between what we call Islamic terrorism, which is technically jihad, and that the connection of those terrorist attacks, jihadi attacks, to Islamic doctrine. And people want to talk about Hamas, they want to talk about Boko Haram, about ISIS, and these different organizations, but they are just organizations, okay? The root of it all is the religion.
Yep.
And it's not my opinion. It's not the opinion of people separate from myself that are out there talking about this. It's written in their own words and in their own doctrine. So unless somebody, Dave, whenever I got involved in this and wanted to learn about it, I went to our mutual friend in Nashville, one of our local experts, Tennessee experts on Islam. And he started me out with the help of a Tennessee legislator at that time that you probably know very well, who's since deceased from Tullahoma.
Right.
But anyway, they pointed me in the right direction, and since then it's grown. I mean, it is easy once you get to learn it, but it's tough working through all the nuances and so forth, and working through these terms like are talked about on your news media, the narratives about radical Islam and radical Islamic terrorism. Well, Islam is Islam, as you well know, and as many of us know. if somebody follows the doctrine of the religion, they are not radical. They are orthodox, correct? Which is the embedded videos which you refer to with Phil Haney are embedded in an article that was kindly um, published on the Front Page Mag website, and also Robert Spencer's website, Jihad Watch. And they're affiliated, of course, with each other. But I wanted, in my article, in which these Phil's videos are embedded, I wanted to address this constant narrative, and which even these well-meaning charities, okay. One of our great country singers, you know, he gets on and he talks about the horrible events of 9/11. Well, in my article is explained, you know, people who weren't born on 9/11 probably don't know what he's talking about.
Yep. What
happened on 9/11? Okay, what is it specifically that happened on September 11th, 2001? Did some airplanes just go awry and run into the World Trade Center towers? Who piloted the airplanes? Why did they pilot them? That's what I get into in the article, where I'm basically bringing back Phil Haney from the dead from 5 years ago to get his message before people, and that's what my video is about. The video was done with Phil, thanks to Phil agreeing to it in 2019, and we did it in 2 separate days, 2-part interview, and like Dave said at the outset, you can access this on the Tennessee Informer website, and I would really, Phil Haney is a unique individual, and I go into a little bit of that in the prelude to the interview. I mean, he's just got a mind unto his own. He's super smart, super patriot, Christian, and you know, Dave, you've had FBI whistleblowers on your program before, correct?
Oh yeah.
Well, Phil Haney, I would call him one of the ultimate whistleblowers, okay? Not to diminish anything my former folks have done, because they were very brave to step out there with what they did. But Phil Haney was there before they came along, and he paid the price for it too. Yeah. And you can read about Phil Haney in his book, which you just put up there. See Something, Say Nothing, where he tried to, he testified before, that's his picture there, before a congressional committee, where he testified as to his findings, and he was persecuted for his findings. Michelle Bachmann knew about it. Louis Gohmert, remember the Republican congressman from Texas?
Yep.
He was a big friend of Phil Haney, and there were certain people in Congress that were on Phil Haney's side and behind Phil Haney, but you have to remember who was in power, okay, during that administration. It was the Barack Obama administration with Eric Holder, Janet Napolitano, Hillary Clinton, and so forth, and those are the folks who were in the background of people like Phil Haney, and it wasn't only Phil Haney. Again, folks, access the video. You can see who is named in that video as the enemies within that went after Phil Haney, patriotic individuals who were trying to warn Americans about the threat of Islamic Jihad and the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. So that's, I'll let you take it up from there, Dave.
I just want to reiterate a little bit. You know, you mentioned that we always hear it. Radicalism. I mean, you hear it on Hannity all the time. I saw a headline today where there was something about radical. There is no such thing as radical Islam. Islam is radical. If you follow it, if you follow the tenets of it, it's radical. So there's not like there's 2 different variations. There's not a good Islam and a bad Islam. There may be some people who call themselves Muslims, and maybe they won't do those things that we would consider bad. But if you are following Islam, all those bad things are part of it. And it's not just a religion, it's a political and military system. It's all encompassing. And
right,
you know,
it's a government unto itself. Yeah. Okay, there is no separation between religion and the government. The government is the religion is the government. And the dangerous part about some of this stuff is so many of our officials still don't understand, because they will make a comment similar to this. I'll paraphrase somewhat. We have to allow people to practice their religion in any way they say fit. Okay? Well, excuse me. There was a practicing Muslim on New Year's Day in New Orleans. Okay?
Yep.
That he was practicing his religion, folks, which is jihad. Okay? Yep. Jihad is set forth in the religion. The Chattanooga shootings right here in Tennessee.
Yep.
What, 2016 maybe, something like that?
Somewhere
I guess 2017
there, yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
He was practicing his religion.
Carlos Bledsoe.
One of the things. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Before that. Right, the Little Rock shootings, and he was Bledsoe was the son, if I recall, of a Baptist minister in Memphis, Tennessee. Was he not?
I don't remember if he was a minister, but I know he was a Christian.
Yep, sure was. I think I'm correct on that. But yeah, I forgot about that one. Thanks for bringing it up. The San Bernardino pair, okay, which Phil talks about. He specifically talks about Orlando, the Pulse nightclub shootings, yep, and San Bernardino as possibly being two events that if him and his colleagues were listened to, and if his information on people was not deleted out of the system, which Phil talks about, these shootings could have possibly been stopped, and lives could have possibly been saved. Okay, no one knows for sure whether that's true. That's what I'm saying, possibly. But the records that Phil and his colleagues were putting in the system were deleted out of the system by the administration. On orders. Whoever specifically was doing it, I can't sit here and tell you who was doing the keys on the keyboard deleting it, but. Those are two. And then, of course, he talks about the scenario of the Boston Marathon bombing also.
Right.
And just a complete breakdown of law enforcement with regard to that.
Now, when he was killed in 2020, and I want to get to you in a minute about what do we know about his death, but this kind of popped up in my head. All right, so 2020, that was towards the end of the Trump administration. Did he not get any? I guess he was out of the FBI by that time. He'd pretty much been retired, and I guess they just did the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, not take him serious. I understand that the first Trump administration, we still had the swamp controlling everything, and is that pretty much the problem?
Right.
Okay.
We did. Donald Trump, of course, did not know then what he obviously knows now.
Right.
And we see the results of that going on every day.
Yeah.
In a lot, in a lot of areas. Okay.
Right.
Not just this area, but this is one of the areas that I'm hoping to somehow break through, and it's not just myself; it's other people too.
What do we know about
somehow break through?
I'm sorry. What do we know about his death? About Phil Haney's death?
In February 21st, Phil was living out of his RV. He had an RV, and he had moved to California. He was in a rural area in Amador County, California. He lived in his RV. He had his computers in his RV and so forth. And he was set to actually get married in a couple of months. Okay, he had a fiance that he was going to get married. He was going to have a heart operation coming up, I think maybe a couple of weeks after his death. But he was found in a chair on the roadside a mile or two away from his RV with a gunshot wound to his chest, which I find that a little odd. And he was laying on the roadside then. He was not. He had been sitting apparently in the chair, and so the Amador County people responded to it. The sheriff's office responded to it, and I actually had a short conversation with the chief deputy out there, and so did one of my former colleagues who was more involved with the local officials out there than I was. But I actually sent this deputy sheriff the interview that which which is what we're talking about tonight. My two-part interview with Phil Haney. I'm not going to say that the Amador County didn't do a decent job, because I don't know that. But what I can say is this: is that I know people who had been in touch with Phil Haney just shortly before he was discovered on the roadside, and according to what they tell me, these people were never even contacted by the investigating authority, the Amador County Sheriff's Office. I know a guy who, when I called him and I said Phil Haney has been killed, he died of a gunshot wound, he immediately called Phil's number. This would have been within a day of Phil being found. That guy, he's a former FBI friend of mine, good friend of Phil's. He was never even called. You would think that investigating authorities would at least make some inquiries, okay? So that leaves a lot to be desired in my mind, but I'm going to let the viewers decide for themselves. The thing is, Dave, a suicide note was found, okay, and that's a hard thing to get past when we want to talk about, was he killed or was it a legitimate suicide? I can say this, that apparently Phil Haney and Louis Gohmert made a pact that if either one of them dies, it was not suicide. If anyone was ever found dead, it was not suicide. So here we go, February 21st, 2020. Phil Haney is found on the side of a road in rural Amador County with a gunshot wound to his chest. The thing is, there was a suicide note which has been authenticated, supposedly by FBI examiners. Of course, what people will say then, well, here we go, FBI and so forth, and I understand that skepticism. Okay, I really do. But you would have to believe, I think, that every single FBI individual has been corrupted, and I don't buy that. I don't. There's still going to be good people in the bureau, and so that's the hard hump to get over, Dave. Both myself, another former colleague, and a retired police chief friend of mine, who was probably better friends with Phil Haney than I ever was. We've all had to resign ourselves to the fact that it probably was suicide. However, that doesn't mean we still don't have questions in the back of our mind.
Right.
It's when a fella is looking forward to getting married, and he's going to try to prolong his life by having heart surgery, and so forth.
Yeah.
Why would that individual end up taking his life? Plus the fact, now this is not ironclad either. He was a deeply devout Christian. Okay, and of course, suicide is against that, but that doesn't mean that devout Christians have not taken their life before. So all of these different nuances, Dave, factors into whether one believes it or not that Phil committed suicide.
Right.
But he had a lot going on in his life. Okay, he had a lot of people that have come after him, and that blew his life apart. Plus the fact that he had lost his wife, his lifelong wife, several years before. She had had cancer when he was going through a lot of this um, uh, stuff that he was going through with the government, which resulted in the book "See Something, Say Nothing."
Right.
She was not doing well during that period of time. She eventually succumbed to cancer.
Yeah.
So Phil had a lot going on.
Right. Well, we're going to get to the clips. We've got just a few clips here. Now, like I say, the whole thing is posted on our website. I definitely encourage everybody to go watch it, but obviously we can't show everything during this show. But we're going to start off the first portion of the interview, and it's going to run for just a few minutes here, and it's on this whole lone wolf theory that we hear anytime there's an attack. It's just a lone wolf. I don't know. There's a lot of lone wolf Islamists out there. It just seems a little suspicious to me. So let's go ahead and play the first clip there.
When you hear the argument that these are lone wolves and that it has nothing whatsoever to do with Islam, that is, I'm sorry, I'm lost for words of how absurd that all is, because
would pathological be a good description?
It's a kind of a willful blindness. It's a delusion on anyone's part that claims that these individuals have no connection with the social structure. If you know anything about Islam, you realize that they of all communities are desperate. It's life and death for them to maintain a connection with the greater community called the Ummah. I mean, it's the same word as mother. Islam. See, Islam is a religion of salam if you aslam. It's all play on the same root word. Islam is a religion of salam, peace, if you aslam, if you submit. There has to be an underlying deeper psychological reason why people will kill themselves and others to establish this law. And we have to be able to understand in the deepest possible intimate way, if you will, what is actually the deeper motivation for them doing all of this.
So that was from your interview with him about a year prior. And, speaking of lone wolves, and you mentioned this earlier, that lone wolf on New Year's Eve in New Orleans. I haven't heard anything. Have you heard anything about that through your channels about what's going on with that investigation in New Orleans?
Not a bit, but Dave, about New Orleans, I would just like to say this. That was in my opinion, in my estimation, that what was displayed on television after that attack with the FBI lady official,
yeah,
and the police chief from New Orleans. I think those are classic DEI hires, okay, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that just displayed really how broken the FBI is. That there you had a manifestation of it right there on New Year's Day and the day after. Because we can't bring ourselves to say the word jihad or attribute it to a religion, yet it is attributable to the religion, as Phil talks about, and that's is talked about by the in the doctrine itself. Dave, one thing I wanted to say earlier, and I'm coming back to it. I thought after I went through some mentoring by my mentors here in Tennessee, that whatever I had to say was really not going to have a whole lot of credibility unless I read it for myself. And that's what I sat down to do because, and I can tell people that I've read it myself. It's not just what somebody else has told
Right.
me. And so if one does not want to believe what people like myself or John Guandolo or Robert Spencer, who you've had on your program, okay, if one does not believe what we want to say, well, then I have to invite you to read it for yourself.
Yep.
And that's that's where you'll come across it. So I wanted to say that earlier, but at any rate, yeah, New Orleans. I don't know. Some of your followers, folks, might know the name Jonathan Gilliam. He's on Newsmax a lot. He's a former Navy SEAL, excuse me, and former FBI agent. But he actually got on there one day, and this is one of the positive signs. He mentioned that he abhors the phrase the lone wolf phrase, okay, which
Right.
is subject matter we're discussing right now because anyway, so that's one of the positive things that I'm seeing just a little bit on outlets like Newsmax, okay. So yeah, the lone wolf. It's just he wants to see they're trying to cover up
Right.
the motivation.
That all
The
these
motivation
lone
behind this-
wolves have the same motivation.
Right.
Yeah.
The same motivation. And you see, Dave, I'm sure this is not lost on you. If you refer to it as terrorism, what has some of the swamp been trying to do for the last several years is call us, people like us, domestic terrorists, right?
Yeah.
The J6ers, okay, domestic terrorists. Well, see, if we get all lumped in the same group, if the jihadis get lumped in the same group as evil domestic terrorists like myself and yourself, well, then we're all terrorists, right? No, I'm afraid not. You can have domestic terrorists. You can have terrorists. By the way, terrorism is a tactic,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Jihad is an obligation. It's a religious obligation. So you can have Soviets or non-Muslims carry out terrorist attacks and it not be jihad. But if a Muslim carries it out and he's a devout Muslim, he is carrying out jihad and not terrorism.
Yeah. And there's different types of jihad. Not all of them have to actually be violent acts. Some of their jihad might be financing those violent acts or supporting those violent acts or doing other things attacking the system they're trying to take over.
Thank you, sir, for a great entry. I bet most of the viewers don't know that there's been jihadi attacks in every county in every state in Tennessee. Everywhere where there's a public school, Dave,
Yep.
there's soft jihad, self jihad being conducted in your textbooks in your public schools, which is another area that I delved into years ago. You probably know some of the same folks I know who were reviewing textbooks back 10, 12 years ago now, okay? And it's not hard to pick out. It really isn't.
That's pretty blatant. It was pretty blatant anyway.
It's pretty blatant. So what Dave is referring to is what's called soft jihad or stealth jihad, jihad of the pen and of the tongue. Efforts to influence you, myself, students, whoever is reading those texts, which are influenced by all of the Middle East money who has come into this country and soft pedaled Islam, soft pedaled Muhammad,
Yep.
and what he did. Those are all acts of jihad, and you can go out there actually on the internet. I remember doing it years ago, and Google jihad in the classroom. Listen, folks, they're not hiding it. Jihad in the classroom is taking place. It's just not blowing people up and running people over with trucks, okay?
Right. We're going to go to the next clip. It's on organization. It's shorter, but I think we're going to hit that real quick.
formed this coalition called a Jamaat. But there's something even more significant that we have also overlooked, apparently. That along with these 5 individuals, of whom Osama bin Laden is the most prominent, there were also 14 other global level organizations that joined in partnership in this coalition and did what is called bay'ah, pledged allegiance to these 5 sheikhs. Would you like to guess, friend, how many of those 14 global level organizations were not from the Arabic speaking side of the equation of the global Islamic movement, but were from the Pashtun Urdu Indian subcontinent side of the equation? 7 of the 14. Well, over there in a place called Afghanistan, there was another branch, another plant emerging up out of the ground, led by these 5 individuals. And their whole purpose was to establish an Islamic caliphate based on Sharia law in a country that would be basically like a clean slate, called Afghanistan, where it was chaotic and disconnected and disorganized, and they were going to go in and show the world how to set up an Islamic caliphate in this wild land called Afghanistan, and more or less did it. But in the process, my point, taking a while to get to it, is that in all the years that we've been hearing about Al-Qaeda and Islamic State and so on, we have completely blinded ourselves or been myopic to the fact that half of the entire coalition is based in the Indian subcontinent.
So they really are everywhere. And you know, there's different organizations, and well, let's go back. I want to mention Osama bin Laden. So obviously the focus was on him for a long time, but you know, even before they finally got him, it was pretty obvious. Okay, once you take him out, somebody's going to replace him. I mean, right. Same thing with the organization. But they're all fueled by the same thing. They're all Islamic. No matter where they're at, they have the same motivation, overall the same goal. Even though the Sunnis and the Shia will kill each other, we're their common enemy. And remember too, and you know this, but just for the audience out there, they call Israel the little Satan and us the big Satan. They also say first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. And our people here in America need to remember that.
Very, very true, Dave. Part of my interview, if anybody goes to watch it, I was less familiar, which I asked Phil about during the interview, with the Islamic move east versus the Islamic movement west and up through North Africa and so forth, which is what we're all basically familiar with. And for those that don't know it, all of those countries used to be Christian, okay? They used to be Christian countries. So those countries were converted by the sword of Islam. It wasn't a willing conversion, okay? Now, the movement east that I asked Phil about went through Hindustan, which, you know, at that time was Hindustan, which we know is India, excuse me, and clear through to Indonesia, which Phil calls possibly the biggest genocide in human history. I believe he mentions 80 million, okay?
What time frame was that?
This would have been after Muhammad died.
Okay, yeah.
In the 7th century. They moved quick. I mean, they moved quick through North Africa, through the Middle East, and east from what is now what was Persia. It's now Iran, Saudi Arabia through Persia. Excuse me, started out in Saudi Arabia, which is what is now Saudi Arabia, and moved through Persia and kept pushing east. So when you put it in those kind of terms, and I think Bill Warner talks about this too, the tears of jihad, okay?
Yep.
The tears of jihad, I mean, Stalin and Hitler were pikers, okay?
Yep. Comparatively speaking, yeah. Yep.
Comparatively speaking, they were pikers. I'm sorry to inform folks about that, but it's true. We're talking maybe 100 million under Stalin and Hitler, and we're talking how many times more than that? There's another article out there, the largest murder machine in history. It talks about Islam.
Yeah, well, 1,400 years. They've had 1,400 years to do all that, and they're still going at it and still slaughtering people. And that's only what that there's peace if you submit. If you don't submit, then there's no peace.
That's exactly correct. That's what they mean by peace, folks. Let me say something. Give you a little insight into Phil Haney. For your viewers, when you look at Phil, you probably see a nerd, don't you? Phil was a scientist. He was a scientist. He was an entomologist, and he worked in the Middle East. That's how he studied the culture. He knew a lot of these people that he worked with on a working level, and he talks about it at the outset of my interview with him about how they could be just perfectly fine individuals, normal individuals, until you bring up Israel or the United States, and then they transform themselves. He said, it was just amazing to see. So Phil was a scientist. He was a bug guy, okay? He studied bugs. But guess what? He'll tell you that made him a good investigator, too, because he kept everything that he ever did. He had notes on everything.
Yeah.
So that's Phil was a nerd, and he calls himself a nerd. In a separate interview, but I'll tell you what, that's one intelligent fellow, and most of us, or all of us who knew him, surely respected his expertise in whatever he did.
All right. Well, now the last segment we're going to cover here is betrayal by our government. Roll the tape, please.
Well, put out a guideline. It said your agency, I guess after you retired, that even though a person is part of a known terrorist organization, you're not allowed to assume that he himself might be a terrorist. That's how bad it got. And so why did I bring that up? Because I wrote this book before they became so prominently well known on the national level. And the reason that they did is they made the decision, the tactical decision, to come out into the open and go after President Trump.
Right.
But they sharpened their knives on people like me. They were doing the same kind of extra-legal violation of due process kind of investigations with people like me that they did in broad daylight with Trump. And they overplayed their hand. They destroyed a lot of people's lives. And Mueller and Brennan are both involved in the Great Purge. They're both involved in the bringing of the Muslim Brotherhood right into the inner circles of the executive branch of the government.
Right.
They're both involved in giving awards and rewards. The FBI was giving Muslim Brotherhood leaders commendation awards, while guys like me were doing our best to bring the notice of their behavior and activity to the law enforcement attention. They just destroyed it. See, they can't be allowing officers to put derogatory information in a classified database while they're giving the same people commendation awards and positions on major policy committees like the Steering Committee for the Countering Violent Extremism Program, for example, one of many examples, or 150 meetings at the White House with individuals from Muslim Public Affairs or CARE or ISNA. Known fronts for the Muslim Brotherhood, and then I can hear the voices. Well, what do you mean, Mr. Haney? There you go again, exaggerating. What do you mean they were known? And this is a really important point in the interview and the story. The reason why it was known is called the Holy Land Foundation trial. which was successfully concluded in November of 2008, exactly the same month that we had an election. And that is really the turning point of our country's national security policy, was that month. Why? Because at that point, the newly elected president could have followed through and gone forward in the law enforcement arena and really shut those organizations down once and for all. But what did they do instead? The exact opposite.
Right.
You know, the Holy Land Foundation trial, a lot of people may not be aware of it, but now that is, there was, CARE was exposed as for what they were in that trial. And a lot of the other players were exposed, but ultimately, did anybody go to jail on that? Was anybody ever sentenced on that? Or did they even get that far? I don't even think they had actually gotten to that point when the Obama administration took over.
No, there were several folks that were convicted, of course, and you see that trial exposed. They were funneling money back to the Middle East. To who? To Hamas.
Right.
It was a money laundering operation, sending money to Hamas. You know, Nihad Awad, who is named in that in the
Indictment.
In the indictment, you know, as because it's CARE and he's the head of CARE.
I think
and we have his picture here if you care to put it up.
Yeah, he was. I think CARE was what, the unindicted co-conspirator.
They were unindicted co-conspirators, and that's what Phil talks about. You know, where he could, the Obama administration could have gone forward and prosecuted these people and shut them down, but they did not. Now, who you're looking at there is Al-Moody. He's an Al-Qaeda financier that was embedded in the Clinton-Gore administration, and the Bureau has done some decent work, and he ultimately was convicted and sentenced to, I believe, 21 years, something like that. He maybe either just got out. I don't know if he was pardoned. I don't think he was part of Biden's pardon, but that's Al-Moody right there. Yeah. He's right in there with Bush too.
Yeah.
So big smile on their face. Now there's Nihad Awad behind George W. Bush, I think, when he called Islam the religion of peace.
Yeah.
And Nihad Awad.
That was after 9/11. That's after 9/11 that Bush went out there with CARE in the background. I think that was actually an outside event, but whatever. And they probably did it more than once, and said that Al-Qaeda has hijacked a peaceful religion, and that right. this does not represent Islam. So I mean, we just got attacked, and here he is apologizing for the enemy, and of course he had to declare war on a terror tactic, on terrorism. Had to declare war on a tactic versus naming the enemy.
Exactly. CARE has been outed multiple times. They tout themselves as a civil rights organization, and they are anything but. I mean, most recently, I think the most overt outing was Nihad Awad himself after October 7th of 2023, if people will recall what happened on that date in Israel.
Yep.
Nihad Awad came out in support of what
Hamas did.
Hamas did, what Hamas carried out on October 7th, 2023. So there you go right there. It's his own words. It's out of his own mouth. It's not just me or Dave telling you about it. It's in their own words.
I want to talk about the Blackburn letter, because you did send Senator Blackburn a letter, and I haven't actually seen the letter, but I'm sure you were trying to warn her about things going on or things that she needed to know about as a senator. Let's talk about that a little bit. And did you get a response?
Sure. In one of my whole efforts my efforts have been geared towards, Dave, that has motivated me through this whole ordeal is the fact that my former employer has been successfully subverted, okay? by the Muslim Brotherhood by removing what Phil Haney referred to as the purge. It's purging of documents out of our training curriculum, tying Islamic doctrine to jihadi attacks. So in 2019, myself, Bill Warner, and Bobby Petray, Tennessee Eagle Forum, hand-carried a letter that is signed by me to Marsha Blackburn's office in Nashville. Now, she did not personally meet with us, but I met with her field director in the office, and we thought we had a good meeting, and we did have a good meeting at that time. But the purpose of the letter is to try to get through to elected officials, okay, to try to exert some influence on the FBI regarding their training program and the fact that FBI training filters down through the states, state training. It influences state training. It influences the fusion centers and local officers, okay? Now, in one of the paragraphs, what we did, was we set forth specific crimes. These are crimes against the U.S. statutes, okay, that are religiously sanctioned in Islam. And I may have left one or two out, but let me just read these to you. And I want to say it starts out with honor violence and honor killing. I think within the last month, there may have been an honor killing reported in New York, or I don't know if it was New York State or New York City.
I remember hearing something about that, yeah.
But here are the crimes: honor violence, honor killing, rape, female genital mutilation, which I want to talk about just a little bit, wife beating, pedophilia, forced child marriage, child abuse, temporary marriages, otherwise known as prostitution, okay? Polygamy, the imprisonment of women, and sex slavery. Now, I believe that, didn't we just pass some legislation and I believe Senator Blackburn is behind a lot of this stuff on the mutilation of children. It regards the transgender issue, okay?
Right. Yeah.
It regards the transgender issue. Isn't female genital mutilation, which is carried out under Islamic law, isn't that
Same thing?
Same thing?
Still mutilation. It's still mutilation.
It's sexual mutilation. It's circumcision of the female genitalia, okay, is what it is. So the female cannot enjoy or get sick or get pleasure from sexual intercourse. That's the purpose of it. We're talking about human trafficking, okay? Recently, all this human trafficking, well, sex slavery, imprisonment, and so forth. Folks, these are all religiously sanctioned under Sharia, which is Islamic law, which is what they seek to impose. That's the bottom line.
Right.
Is that Sharia? If we want to talk about one world government, let's talk about it that way. The Islamic Caliphate, essentially, Dave, is one world government, isn't it?
Yep.
We all submit to Islam.
I want to ask you a question before we get to these next slides. So did Senator Blackburn's office respond? Did you ever get any response from her?
I'm still waiting, Dave. It's been 6 years almost.
Well, now wait a minute. She may be running for governor, so maybe you'll get a response now. Something else that I wanted to say. We talked about you can read this stuff for yourself. Now that's a lot to read. I got it, but I would encourage anybody. There's a book by Bill Warner. I think it's Sharia for Dummies. I think that's the name of it, and it's a little thin book. But it covers all the basics that you need to know. Put it this way, if you read that and you still thought Islam was a good religion, you're a fool, okay? So I would recommend it. It's a short, thin book. The average person can read it pretty quick and see. You won't know everything about Islam, but you will know enough to know you want nothing to do with it, and it's dangerous, and it's incompatible with our Constitution. Matter of fact, it's incompatible with civilization. So let's go back to the slide that you had up there.
Actually, Dave, I think I'll have to bring our mutual friend Brandon House into the conversation.
Okay.
I put this slide together for a presentation that myself and several others did for Brandon House back in, I think it was 2021, because when we talk about when another one of my what I talk about, radical, the adjective radical and terrorist, these are all the corruption of words and language, okay? Right. Which is what I get into in this spectrum that you just put up there, if you put it up there again. If you can get that up there, Kevin, there you go. Thank you. Okay, it's down again. You know, I didn't make the spectrum out, just David Baldovin making it up. I got that basically from the book, The 5,000 Year Leap, if anybody is familiar with that book. And it goes back to the founders and how when the founders were putting together this form of government, this republic, they knew that from history there was all this fluctuation between no government, which is referred to as right, anarchy, and or it's I don't know that the word totalitarianism was used back then, but it was authoritarianism, tyranny, whatever you want to call it, okay? Which is communism, it's Nazism, monarchy to a certain extent. You know, you can have I guess a good monarch, okay, but it's still an authoritarian. Right. And to me, there is nothing more authoritarian than Islam. Yeah. Another book that I would refer your readers to is Honor Killing by Daniel Akbari. He's a former Muslim, and you mentioned it's against human nature. And when I finished reading Daniel Akbari's book, I called Bill Warner. I sat back in my chair and I said, you know what? This is a 24/7 constant. I mean, Islam, if you follow what's set forth in the doctrine, it is a 24/7 totalitarian state. Yep. Your every move is governed. What you say is governed. How you wash yourself is governed. How you brush your teeth is governed. I mean, it's a total, goes against basic human nature. People can't live that way. Yep. And I have basically one question for people, or one comment: why the Middle East is like it is?
No, it's Islam. Islam and tribalism. Islam and tribalism.
It's tribalism. It's just people, even the folks who push this stuff. Okay, Dave, we would be fools to think that they actually follow this stuff. Okay, because we always hear stories about tearing hotel rooms apart, drinking whiskey, you know, the parties and so forth. So it is really actually impossible to live by the rules of Islam.
Well, now wait a minute. You can do all these things that you can do. The most deviant thing you want to do to a non-Muslim. So that's how they get around that. They're not really restraining themselves. They may be restraining themselves within their religion with other Muslims, but they're not restraining themselves on any other thing you can think of, because they can do it to non-Muslims. So there's no real restriction there.
Correct. Yep. So anyway, that getting back to the spectrum there, that's another play on words. When people refer to, let's say, somebody like myself or yourself in a derogatory term, hard right, okay, or far right. Well, guess what? If you chop anarchy off of that spectrum, then you get us extremists out here on the far right, don't you? Which are otherwise known as patriots.
How is anarchy even on the right? I don't know who would put anarchy on the right.
Well, because anarchy basically is no government. It's just the opposite of totalitarian government. And there are people who will tell you that, and I think a good example of it maybe is Antifa. People will take this spectrum and make a circle out of it instead of just a linear, and see the tyrannies, the communists. They'll use the anarchists for their ends. Okay, chaos in the streets. Okay, use them for chaos. So basically, that those are all good arguments. Okay, as to when I say it's right and left, I mean that's not something that I came up with. That comes out of the the French back a couple hundred years ago. The conservatives sat on the right, and libs, if that's what you want to call them, the more progressive folks or anything goes folks, they're on the left. So that's how those terms came about.
Oh, okay. Well, you mentioned earlier that. You mentioned an FBI agent that was talking about the threat out there and was kind of scoffing at the whole lone wolf thing. And, of course, we've mentioned that there's no such thing as radical Islam. There's just Islam. But recently, Tulsi Gabbard, new intel chief, she declared radical Islamist terrorism the most urgent national security threat. And, the only thing wrong with that statement is there's no radical Islam, there's only Islam. But at least she is recognizing it as a threat. And, I don't think the last administration didn't, and the Biden administration didn't. Excuse me, the Obama administration didn't. So I'm glad to see it. As long as we can, once we can get it across to everybody that it is radical, that there is no such thing as radical Islam. But at least she's paying attention to that and sees that as a threat.
It's it's a good start. I think it's a start. So we shall see. And I guess I'm breathing a sigh of relief, Dave. Maybe you and I are taking off the hot seat, right, as being the most dangerous people in America.
Well, I don't know that I ever made that list, but anyway. Well, hey, any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to hit? We got just a couple of minutes here. I'm glad you brought Tulsi Gabbard up because I want to give some insight into the new FBI director, and I gained this insight from watching his opening statement before the confirmation hearings, and I'm glad I watched it because it'll tie right back in to what we're talking about with the movement of Islam East through Hindustan. Kash Patel talks about his parents having to flee Uganda in the mid-1970s. And I remember Uganda in the mid-1970s. There was this guy, that was when I was still getting my feet wet in the FBI. I was a young agent. And Idi Amin was the dictator of Uganda, okay? Now, go look it up for yourselves. Idi Amin, one of the first things he did was cut ties with Israel. Now, why might he have done that? If you look it up, he was a Muslim, okay? And Kash Patel talks about that his parents had to flee because of the way they looked. Yep. So, Idi Amin basically was going to establish, I can't remember how long he was in power there, but he was taken out of power at some point, obviously. But there was a famous Israeli raid. There was an airplane hijacking. There's a movie about it. Yeah, raid on Entebbe.
The raid on Entebbe, okay, and I think Bibi Netanyahu's brother lost his life in that raid, but they rescued um, the passengers on the plane.
Yep.
The Israeli commandos did another great job by the commandos. But where I'm going with this is we now have an FBI director who was born to parents who had to flee Islamic rule in Uganda. Now, does Kash Patel know what I'm saying? Does he actually understand or know? Because who knows what his parents specifically told him? Okay,
right.
And we have that going on today, Dave. Is it in the Congo? Does the Congo still exist, or is it Nigeria? I think that's
Nigeria.
What I'm thinking.
Nigeria. They're killing.
Nigeria.
The Muslims are killing the Christians. The Muslims are killing the Christians pretty much everywhere.
As we speak,
Yeah.
there's a genocide going on in Africa.
Yeah.
So it didn't end with the rule of Idi Amin in Uganda. It's going on. It has gone on. It goes on everywhere. And Kash Patel's ancestors in Hindustan were affected too, weren't they? Centuries ago. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and you still got the whole Hindu Muslim thing going now, and maybe that's part of Tulsi's understanding on this. I think she's got some, Hindu in her background, if I'm not mistaken. But in any event, whatever reason, maybe it was her deployments. I know she deployed a couple times overseas. So, hopefully people wake up, and hopefully we do a better job of teaching everybody in this country the threat that it poses, and that it's incompatible with civilization. That's the bottom line. There's no getting around it. If you can't follow that doctrine and be civilized. You can do one or the other, but you can't do them both.
One final thing that I'd like to stress is that freedom of religion does not, the First Amendment, Phil Haney talks about it, okay? The First Amendment does not supersede Article 6 of the Constitution. Article 6 is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And what is trying to be imposed is Sharia,
yep.
Which is, 180 degrees opposite of the U.S. Constitution. Like you said, it's incompatible. It's not a matter of freedom of religion. Freedom of religion does not allow you to mow people down, on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, okay, to practice your religion.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate all you do. I'm sure I'll have you back in the future. And, hopefully we can have a show where we have some really good news to talk about.
I think anytime, Dave, that we can discuss things in these forums, it's tough discussion matter, but I think the discussion forum is good. Okay, so I think all of that is positive. And again, you're doing a hell of a job, so just keep it up.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate all you do as well, and I appreciate you coming on. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Please find and follow us on Facebook and X. Pending legislation you need to know about, I want to talk real quick. The nullification bill, Senate Bill 0479, will be in the state and local government committee tomorrow. However, there's been an amendment suggested. I can tell you this, if that amendment that was suggested is adopted, Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty will not be supporting the legislation because it guts the bill. So hopefully that does not happen tomorrow. So we'll certainly keep you informed on that. There's an event coming up this Friday. Your sheriffs have probably been notified about it by the Sheriff's Association. It's a constitutional sheriff's event with Chris Ann Hall. That's March the 13th. Encourage your sheriffs to attend. They have all received an email from the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, but if they hear from you that you would appreciate them attending, maybe they'll be a little more inclined. I thought we had a photo to go with that, but if not, I apologize. TFA Day on the Hill is March 26th. If you're in the TFA and can be there, it would be a really good day to be there because, in their efforts to try to stifle anything positive concerning your gun rights here in Tennessee. They moved all the House bills that are under civil justice sub to the 26th. So a good turnout would definitely help the situation. So if you can be up there on the 26th, please do. You can go to TennesseeFireArmsAssociation.com to find out more about that. Also, one of the bills to be heard that day is HJR 53. That's the constitutional amendment to change our state constitution back to just having a right to keep and bear arms and not allowing the legislature to regulate a wearing of arms. So that's a very important bill that we hope to get through. Join us for our second show tonight, 8:30, when we'll be joined by Elizabeth Murphy here to explain legislation concerning the risk of red dye in school lunches. And after that, a discussion with the outgoing and incoming Lawrence County GOP chairs and frustration with the SEC that led to a lot of drama at the recent reorganization. Now, the drama was not between the new and the old. It was between the party, you could say the party and the SEC. Our guest next week will be Tom DeWeese with the American Policy Center, here to explain how UN climate change policies are still being implemented through the states. Hope you'll join us again next week. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.